Good morning, folks. All right, guys, I'd love to kick off if people just to get you in the chat here. Yeah, see, oh, got some Iowa folks. Josh is an Iowa boy.
Yeah, I am from Iowa. I think Liam mentioned it in the chat. We're in San Diego now, but I grew up in Iowa and I went to the U of A too, and I saw one from Tucson as well. So
Watch out.
kind of all over the place here.
I feel like San Diego's the new Tucson with this hot weather we've been having here recently. Yeah, good morning, everybody. And just want to say you guys kept Liam very busy on the chat yesterday, which is fantastic. That feel free to interrupt as we go along. We've got a couple of folks manning the chat here. We'll jump in to spend most of our time on reviewer today. Really important part of the product. But if you can just keep Liam overwhelmed. I think he had to take an hour to calm down yesterday after we went through the amount of questions that we had, which is great. We've got plenty of people there. So any questions you guys have on the echoing? It's funny. Liam, can you or somebody on our team, can you ping just to make sure it's not echoing on your end? Sometimes it can be your speakers there, depending on kind of how you're listening to it. We had a couple of people that were having echoes yesterday, but I don't think it's a Zoom issue. I think it's a computer issue. Okay, sound is good on our end. Okay, fantastic. Beautiful. Oh, hey, one question I have for the team, or for the crew there. I'd love to see like firm size of your tax staff. Just as we go through this, that will help me. It's so different for like a small firm versus a mid-sized firm or a larger firm. But I'd love to see if you guys can give me like firm size of your tax staff. I just want to see exactly how many like solo folks we have versus like 3 versus 10 or whatever. That way we can cater this a little bit to the different size of firms. Perfect. Okay, this is good. Look at that. We have from 1 to 60 I've seen so far. So that's all of the above, basically. Perfect. But a lot of like sub 5, which is great. So we'll try to do a good job of talking to both sizes of firms. In a firm where your tax staff is like 1, obviously you've got the same person preparing and reviewing, which is just a bit different than a bigger firm where you're typically doing the prep and review with different folks. So that's super helpful. And if as we're talking about this, I will keep kind of one eye on chat as best I can. So if you guys want to like, we'll talk about both where we can of like how it impacts roles, which obviously applies to like mid-size and larger firms. But if you guys have questions about that, just put them in chat and then we'll go through that as we go. But yeah, I mean, I think we can kick off, Josh, whenever you're ready, if you want to screen share. Just yesterday, I think almost everybody was probably on the call yesterday. If not, we'll send the recording out to folks so you can see that. But yesterday we covered the preparation process, like the just extraction of data and pushing that into your tax software. Today, I wanted to start with the preparation checklist and then go forward. So the concept here is like what we've already done now before today. And Josh, if you want to pull up the binder with the prep checklist whenever you want to, we'll start there and go forward from there. So the idea here is like, hey, I've extracted the information, I pushed it into my tax software already. And then what you're going to do next there, and hopefully this is obvious because when you export, you get this big message that's like, okay, here's the prep checklist for you. And it also gives you like the PDFs of the brokerage statements as well when you export so that if you're going to attach those um, uh, in your tax software, that's something we can't always do through the tax software with the automation that we use. But we'll give it to you there so you can download brokerage statements that need to be uploaded as well. If you need like the per trade information, right? And so that's right there for you. But we'll kind of start there and go forward. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Josh. You can run through that. And I think what you guys, so you got the brokerage statements up there on the right, and then down below you have any items. These would be source documents, right, that have continued work needed. And if you click on those, you can it will tell you exactly what we think is needed there. So in this case, like we don't do the child and dependent care expenses, but we're telling you where it needs to go. And what we're trying to do is kind of pull this flow into the application. There's some real benefits to this. Like one, we can update the work papers for you as you do this, the binder. I'll use those terms interchangeably. So guys, just catch me up if I'm confusing people, let me know. I think the industry is not completely consistent on our use of the word work paper versus binder. So we do use them interchangeably here. So just translate in your mind if you need to. But yeah, Josh, if you on the example that we're giving here, like these would be things that we see that need to be entered to complete the return, but that we don't yet enter. And one quick comment there, I appreciate everybody joining. One of the benefits is we can talk a little bit about kind of what's coming. And one of the things we'll be doing is really expanding this as we go through the year. You guys will see, even in the next few weeks, we will start to work with you with an agent that's doing the rest of the data entry. So I'll kind of tease that for you guys. It won't be too long before you can see that and play with it. It'll be long before next tax season, where we'll actually say, hey, do you want us to go ahead and do this for you? Which is going to be a really cool step forward in our functionality towards completing, closer to 100% of these returns. But examples of this, and Josh, you probably could give some good ones too. Like if there's something in the footnotes of the K1, right, that needs to be looked
Hmm.
at, um, or dependent care expenses, right? In this case, where they're just fields that we don't map to. What we're trying to do as a team here is be like super transparent about what the system has already done and what's left and needs to be done. That's kind of the point of the design of this. And then one really cool piece is we can actually start to enter this information as well in your tax software here very soon. Even in the next few weeks, we'll start to expand what we're doing there. But this is kind of the baseline, like why we built it this way, because if you're working in the application, you can enter this information and then you can check it off like, hey, that's done. And then it's going to update the binder, right, that's been completed. And you can make notes as well on this, or you can thumbs down if it's like, hey, this isn't something that's relevant for this return. Exactly. Josh is showing you there. And then kind of tell us why. And that gives a signal back to our system. Like imagine, there's millions of different types of potential documents. Um, this is why you pay people to prepare tax returns for you, because it's just so complex, right? There's strategic decisions that are being made here along the way. For example, like if I know they're over the income threshold for deducting child dependent care expenses, I might choose to not put that in my software. I might still put it in there and let the software limit this automatically, which is probably what I would prefer that my preparers do. But I want to be open to the fact that people have different processes here, right? There are times where it might be like, I looked at this and this is not, they're not going to get a deduction anyway, so I'm not going to put it in the software. So again, like we're just calling out everything we think needs to get done, but you have the ability to both edit it, mark it as complete, and also mark it as like irrelevant, basically for this return and make a note of why. And
Hmm.
that's really helpful for our systems as we improve our systems over time, but also helpful for your staff because whether it's a work paper, even for a solo firm, you've got notes on what you decided to do. Like these are kind of the decisions oftentimes that are related to that return. So, anyways, Josh, sorry to hog the first few minutes here, but wanted to kick off with that for everybody. And hopefully there may be a slew of. Let me just make sure I'm looking at chat here really quickly. Um, oh, Jason, how many folks are in Juno? I think we're at 60 basically, which is crazy. We were 10 people in I think December, maybe 12 people, something like that. So we've grown quite a bit. One other comment there I'll make, I know I talked a little bit about Josh being, Josh originally joined our support team and has kind of moved over to solutions, which means he's helping firms onboard and like helping them, with their operating procedures, like their SOPs, if they're adjusting those for Juno. We do sometimes pilots where it's like a longer onboarding, basically, to help firms adjust their standard operating procedures as well. And Josh runs a lot of that for our team with our success team. So he kind of sits in between. But one comment I wanted to make is we also have a team of accountants, like our support people do this as well, because they're all accountants. But then we have an additional team that just works on like accuracy of making sure that when we're extracting data, it's going to the right place in your tax software. There's an entire team of people doing that, which is something we did not have last December. And really helps like improve the performance of our systems here. So we're still in the beginning of this journey. If you think about just the amount of folks and energy we have kind of going towards this, the system gets a lot better because our team is is constantly working. Like every time we get feedback from a user, we go back and review that as a team. And if the feedback is like, hey, based on this is not relevant because I don't know, this is probably a bad example with child independent care expenses, but let's say, um, I don't know, like this is no longer deductible or something like that, right? If we get that feedback from folks, then we would go in and say, hey, we need to suppress this in the future. Obviously, we validate this as a team, and then we would update the system based on that. So, anyways, a little bit of a teaser for you guys to start the day. Josh, I'll be quiet here for a moment so you can jump into what you were going to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And with this specific example, the reason I pulled it up is because we uploaded that not supported source document for the child care expenses yesterday as part of that preparation. And then today, or after the call yesterday, I'd actually gone through and entered that in the software. And so once that's done, the next part of the flow is to mark it as resolved here in Juno. And so when I click that little box in the top left of the item, it went away for a second. You can always bring it back by toggling off this hide resolved items feature. But this check will sync to a couple of different parts of Juno too that I'm about to jump to and show here just to help keep track of which items have been addressed by your team. So I can click back to preparation list here. These checklist items, there are a lot of different things that can come up here. I know Dave mentioned some things with like the K1 statements earlier. It looks like there were some surface with this preparation for those too, but this preparation checklist is always going to live here on the screen where we did the data mapping yesterday, right before the export in the top right. And then it's also going to live in the binder as well. And just to show where that comes up, I'm going to scroll down to that unsupported tax document or that child care expense here. And as you can see, that preparation checklist item that was surfaced also syncs here and shows up as an action item here. And then that check mark I make to resolve the data shows up here as well. So whenever you have those checklist items, you'll also be able to see it in the binder.
And at the risk of being repetitive, I do see some comments about like understanding end to end. We broke this into pieces. So yesterday, right, was the beginning part with preparation. We extracted the information, we brought the data in, and then we extracted all the information, we validated that, and then that creates the initial binder, right? And then we did the export yesterday. So if you kind of watch that in combination with today's boot camp,
Mhm.
you'll see the full end to end of both preparation and review of the return. Today, we're going to kind of start with, hey, I just exported and I'm going forward, right? And so, what we're not going to do because it just felt like it wasn't a great use of time was go actually enter the child and dependent care expenses. We're going to kind of like pretend we went and did this basically today, just so you guys don't have to watch us go through a bunch of random screens in a particular tax software. But the just want to make sure everyone's super clear on where we are. Between yesterday, we extracted, we validated, and then we exported and we created this work paper that you're seeing here. And then today, we're going to take this, right, go through some of the checklist items, and then we're going to jump into reviewer once we've like entered those items, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the end-to-end process is split between the two sessions, just so we could like really deep dive on what's going on with the system and answer any questions along the way. So anyways, Josh, just want to make sure that was clear for folks.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. And then, yeah, as Dave mentioned, I think the next step of the process, so once you've exported the data, cleared the preparation checklist items, is then you can print a copy of the draft return and then upload that back into Juno's reviewer as well. And so I had done that as well. So after I cleared this checklist item that showed up, I can click over to reviewer now, and I uploaded my draft of the current year 1040 here. And it took a little bit of time to process, so I wanted to do it before the call, just because it can take a few minutes and we don't need to sit around while that's going on. But once you've got that uploaded, you can hit proceed to reviewer. Um, and these are the different screens you'll see here. So the first screen will be that overall review plan. At the top of the screen, we'll give an overall assessment, um, highlighting some of the different issues with the return, highlighting the things, some of the themes and issues we're seeing here. And then below this will surface some different action items. So some of these will come from the preparation checklist and will be the things that we saw right after the export. Like once again, that childcare expense form that was surfaced on the preparation checklist, and I checked it off there, still syncs to reviewer here as an action item. And we can see that that's been resolved as well. But there are going to be some more action items too here that can come up kind of as a result of what we're seeing on the return. I know that this is one that caught my eye. So since I had filled out that childcare form and was claiming that credit on the return, but I didn't have, or I had the filing status set to single for the return, it's calling out that there's something additional I can clarify there and look for whether it can meet a different filing status here. Another item it's calling out is the personal use days versus rental use for the Schedule E that we exported. So the form that we had was a little bit unique in that there was $0 in rental income on that, and it's seeing that and it's calling it out here that that was a little bit strange since I'm claiming expenses for it. And in this section, I know maybe in this case, like I or somebody else on our team already took care of this in the software. So once again, you can use this little checkbox in the top left to check them off. There's the additional little edit icon here to add a description or change things about the action item. And once again, there's going to be some different like feedback options here that you can use to tell Juno if it's applicable, or give us some feedback on that too in this step.
Yeah, and a couple of really good questions along the way here. So part of the reason, like you can see on personal use days as well as child and dependent care expenses, there's kind of extra information you need to be able to enter this correctly, right? And so this is why with Juno, we don't just like force everything into the tax software because there's um, additional context that needs to come in here. So for like child independent care expenses, like I don't have which child this is for oftentimes on the form itself. And so I need to go back and forth. And by the way, there's some like rules around child independent care expenses that are deductible, right? Like sometimes people submit, I don't know, they're like soccer expenses or something, right? And so you need additional like judgment from a trained professional. As we said yesterday, I think we're going to have jobs for a long time going forward because of items like this. Every return has like four or five of these things, or at least your typical return does. So on a W-2, we can go ahead and enter the full thing, and like you don't see any of those documents showing up here. But on a Schedule E, for example, personal use days is often not on the P&L or list of expenses that they might send across. They might send you a few different documents on that one, but oftentimes they might not send you that in their initial batch of documents, or it's like on the organizer, it's somewhere else, and then probably needs to be reviewed as well, right? In this case, Josh called this out, but hey, you have $0 of rental income. Did that mean that you were using the house or what was going on here? That's where you really do need a human to gather like this additional context. So these are often documents where there's additional context or like a strategic decision or a conversation that needs to happen with a customer, maybe an email going back and forth with a client saying, can you just like double check these things to make sure that this is reported accurately? So like that's part of why we don't support some of these documents. In the case of the Schedule E, we would have already put the expenses in the tax software, but we're calling out here that like personal use days is a field that we're not filling out, right? So that's kind of the point and the architecture behind this screen and this process. Sorry, Josh, I just responding to some of the comments in here.
Okay, thank you. Um, I don't think I'll go through the rest of these. A lot of them are similar to what were on the preparation checklist too, but I don't think we need to dive into everything. Again, some of the K1 action items that we saw on the previous screen, whether it's like a code that wasn't supported or we're calling out for manual entry or asking you to review some of the QBI information too, those will show up here. You can also sort this screen by like how you would like it to look. So if you'd prefer like the one column look where it just lists out everything, or the three column look here, you can make those changes. And then you can also reassign the priority level to these action items. So like if Juno says it's a really high priority thing, but you want it to show up a little lower on the screen, and you don't consider it to be high priority, you can always change that too. And then here, there's also an add action item button. If there's anything that you'd like to add in and call out for your staff, if somebody else is going to jump in and look at reviewer and take care of some of these items on the return.
And it's probably worth spending a little bit of time here just because I see a lot of comments on this, which are great, by the way. really good questions on like how this system is working. And this is why in trial we want people to go through actual returns, because you'll see what Juno
Hmm.
did and what's left to do. Basically, this is a really easy way to see that. It actually is smart enough to know what is in your tax software. So even based on the individual type of tax software. So there's like a code AJ on the K1. That's one of the comments here. And a note for you guys on that, I think it's like box 20 code AJ or something like that. That's one of the ones I just remember because I helped the team map it, where there's not always an entry for that in the tax software. So we just want to make sure we're calling out that we haven't put that in there. I think ProConnect doesn't have, there's like a separate place where you can put that. And I think that is oftentimes not relevant from a tax perspective, but we still want it reviewed by someone. And one other comment, I get this question all the time of like, hey, what's going to happen with entry level tax preparers? Like, are they going to disappear? Are we not going to need them anymore? My response to that, at least based on today's AI, is that this is going to help them actually. People will be like, can you train them? Like, how are you going to train them if AI is just doing all the work? This is a really good example, I think, of, or at least I hope it is, of a system that's been designed to actually explain to you what needs to happen to finish the return. And someone asked about the organizer. We also look at the organizer as well. So any format of organizer. So we'll be pulling things from there as well if there are follow-ups needed from the organizer. Like they said, they had a new child or something like that, we would put it on the prep checklist. And so we are gathering things from all of those different documents, and we're trying to capture everything that needs to be done to complete the return. Now, there are times where you might have context that we don't have, like a trade with no basis. It didn't actually have no basis. It's got basis that needs to come in from somewhere else. Like, I don't know, they transferred the stock into E-Trade from a different account, and they gave you some different basis information. Or you had it last year, right? For example. So we will call out the things that have not been put in the system as long as we can see that that information is somewhere, basically. But I will say this, like this is a really great way for even kind of an entry level for some of the solo shops. What I hear people say a lot is like, I might get like an intern or something during tax season that could help me with some of the data entry. You can see here that like this is actually a really nice system for that person because it actually gives you instructions on how to do what we think needs to be done to complete the return. So if you're building good AI systems, I actually think it's going to be really helpful for junior staff to do a better job. And I think we'll talk about this more as we go through the year. But one comment I want to make that I'm really proud about is I sold my firm in Q1. Not proud about that specifically, but I'm really proud about like two of my tax preparers actually got promoted to manager because of the quality of their work. And part of that's because they've learned to use this system. They're also really, really good people. But they have also like learned to use this system really well. And what Joel told me that it was reviewing the returns for my firm this year was like, I didn't find a single mistake on a return this season from those folks. And part of that is because Juno does a really good job of like finding things that need to be done to finish the return. As you guys probably know, if you're just even thinking about this list and the context required to like put this together, it is kind of acting like a pretty experienced tax person, right? And it's giving you instructions for what needs to get done. So even though we're only doing like 95% of the data entry on average for a return, that last 5% can be like the hard 5%, but we are giving you instructions for it and we're updating the work papers as you go and start to complete those things. So that's what we're trying to do here. And obviously, we get a lot of feedback from our customers on like how this works and how they want to see this evolve over time, which is fantastic. We're constantly evolving in this part of the product. But anyways, Josh, I think I've killed that point for everybody, but there were just a bunch of comments on like, okay, what about these documents and how does this work? So that's what we're
Gotcha.
fundamentally trying to do here is like recommend how to finish the return
Hmm.
from the preparation checklist.
Yep. And yeah, these action items can come from not supported docs. They can come from things from the organizer, like Dave mentioned, or things we're seeing in the return too. Once you upload a copy of that, that's just the first tab of reviewer here with the action items. And then I'd also like to jump into some of the other tabs as well. So the next one we'll see is going to be source to return. This will just create like an expectation of the return in Juno based off of the data that was uploaded and the data that was validated with the source documents and compare that to the uploaded 1040. And there's a couple of different views you can look at here. We can go line by line on the 1040. So for this one, I navigated to the 1040 tab in this, and we were seeing that box one wages is matching up between the W-2 that I had uploaded into Juno for this export and what was on the return that I uploaded back into Reviewer here. Um, there's a lot of different, we'll go through all of the different forms on the return here and do the analysis at each level here. On this, I guess I can navigate back to that box one. Um, but within this, you're able to leave notes right here on each line item. So if you want to add a note for your team to go and see later on, you can do that here. And then there's also a mark as reviewed button. So as you work through and as you double check each item, whether you just focus on only the non-matching ones or the matching ones, we've got this mark as reviewed and reviewed by function on the left to help see where each return's at.
Yeah, and one quick comment there, just for clarity purposes, on the source to return, like we go back through and check everything again. So we look at like, does the sum of all the 1099 INT interest match what's on the 1040? So this is tracing line by line on the tax return. And again, we're using 1040s for this because it's the most interesting place. We also do partnerships and business returns, and it's very similar actually in terms of the structure and how it works. But on a business return, it's a little bit simpler because there's not the tracing is much simpler. But that being said, for folks, what we're trying to do is provide additional context here for you. Like we're going back and we're rechecking everything, just like a reviewer would do. And we actually like run new agents against this. So we actually use multiple different, along the way, we are validating in different ways with different types of AI. As we get to review, we rerun everything with a different architecture so we can try to make sure that nothing got lost along the way. But an example, I like the interest example here, which one comment is like you could have interest coming out of a crypto account as an example, right? If people are staking tokens, they might have interest that came from an email or something like that. And so the 1099 INT amounts don't add up to what's on the 1040, but there's a legitimate reason for that. And so that's where the person preparing the return or yourself, if you want to make notes, could go through here and say, hey, there's a $1,200 coming in out of the crypto account from an email, right? And then it's going to update the work paper and binder as well as give you an audit trail basically of the changes that were made from the original source documents. So that's kind of what we're looking to do here. Some people, I have my preparers do this so that when I get to it as a reviewer, I can see like what the core issues were and I can see that they addressed each of those issues. If you're a solo shop, one thing I will say is what people often do here that's a little bit different is they'll use this just as a double check, but not go through every single line, right? They might see an exception, but just be like, okay, I know that I changed something there. I'm not going to like take the time to go document that necessarily. It depends on the basically how, yeah, exactly. Josh is showing you, you can kind of like hide all the ones that match and just look at the non-matching values, which is probably how most people use this, I think. But you have the ability to go see every single thing that we validated again, just to know that our system has gone back and looked at that at a line by line level on the 1040.
Yeah, and then the next couple of tabs, Dave, is there anything else you wanted to add there? Is it okay if I
No,
jump?
I'm going to
Okay,
try to be quiet so I can let you talk here at some point.
all good,
Sorry,
all
my
good.
caffeine kicked in early this morning, folks. So I'm going to just mute myself for a few minutes and try to.
Well, the next thing I just wanted to jump to is going to be the year over year analysis within Reviewer itself. So in this preparation, I uploaded the 2024 return into Prepare and created that expected documents checklist, which we went over yesterday, but shows up at the bottom of the preparation. And we'll highlight anything because we look through the source documents in the prior year return. We'll make a list of all those, compare it to what is in the preparation in Juno for the current year, and then call out anything that's still missing. And since I had the prior year return uploaded there, it pulled it into Reviewer as well. And you can upload them separately into Reviewer too if you don't want to use it in Prepare. But here, we're able to do a year over year analysis on these 1040s. And that analysis has a couple of different aspects. So the first page is just going to be titled year over year analysis. It'll look similar to that first page we were on, where there's just kind of an overall overview and some observations here at the top of the screen that goes over some of the big changes year over year, some of the big red flags that it's seeing. If there were some really big changes in the return year over year, And then there's also this recommendations page, which will highlight some of the key things we should take action on first year over year. And then if you continue to scroll down on this year over year analysis tab, we'll do a line by line analysis of each form, similar to how we saw on that source to return tab, where it lists out 1040 and all of the other different parts of the return. As you scroll down, you can see us go line by line, call out what was in there last year, what's in there this year, and the change. In this tab, we give it an explanation here to the best we can to just call out why the variance came up in this stage. And then once again, there will be that notes column and mark as reviewed button that you can utilize to leave notes within reviewer itself here on the return and also mark things off as reviewed. And then I can scroll to the right just to show all of the different forms that were a part of this return or all the different schedules here. And there are some similar action items or similar analysis on each one as it just kind of goes line by line throughout all these pages. And then the other check is going to be year over year document analysis. So this is similar to the expected documents checklist within Prepare, where it just calls out missing documents year over year. But this one's a little bit more in depth too, because it also can show things that were in the prior year return or weren't in the prior year return, but are in this year's return. So as you scroll down, it's a pretty simple UI here, but it'll just list out the document names that we're seeing in either of the returns and call out whether it was in the return last year or not, and if it's in the return this year or not too, with these little yes, no columns here.
Yeah, one quick comment there for folks. You may have validated like the checklist in TaxDome or Carbon Canopy, whatever you might be using there. You also have it again when you upload documents in Juno, and you have it again here. And part of the reason we do that is just because sometimes there's different people from the firm. Like if I have a reviewer actually using this screen, I want to have it here too, so I don't have to go back to my practice management software to be able to see this. So we're trying to, even though some of this might be duplicate information that you could find elsewhere, we want to kind of bring it all into one screen, right? And this, I don't know how you guys review return or how folks review returns, but for me, this is one of the things I was going through manually that is pretty time consuming, right? So I would go back again and look at last year's documents versus this year's documents. I would go back again to all the original source documents and go to the return and make sure that they're showing up somewhere. And I would compare last year's return with this year's return to see like just structurally what's different, if there's income coming from different sources, as I want to like think about explaining, for example, why there might be like an additional tax liability this year, or even why they're getting a refund. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is pull all of that in here so you've got all the context. But we built this basically, to track like what a reviewer is doing step by step, right? You look at the original documents, you trace them to the return, you look at what changed year over year. Like that all hopefully will be popped up to you in a very simple way in this process.
Yeah, and then at the bottom of the screen here too, it calls it out in this text, but you're able to re-upload the current year 1040 once the changes have been made that we're calling out here, and once things are finalized. So you can run back in or jump back in and run reviewer again. So I think the best practice that we see is uploading kind of a first draft to reviewer once the export's done and the preparation checklist is complete. Running that, generating all these insights and action items and the analysis to the prior year return. And then if you do make changes and you have more of a final draft later on, you can bring that back in and run this same analysis again.
So I'll say that again for folks. You run it, you run reviewer. If you go and make changes based on some of the things we have here, what we recommend is rerunning reviewer, right? So that it has an updated list, and it also is going to update the binder for in case you have a secondary reviewer, right? Which some firms are using.
Yeah. I haven't been able to keep an eye on the chat. This is kind of the last tab in reviewer here that I wanted to highlight. But are there any other questions that you saw, Dave, that we should jump into?
Um, yeah, I think just a couple. comments that I'm seeing. So yeah, we will look through, like any contextual documents basically, and consider them here in the reviewer notes. So that actually can include, and we often today are not getting this uploaded very regularly, but can include emails from a client. It can include responses on the organizer. So for example, on the organizer, if they say they got married that year or they had a child, right? We are going to actually review every document that's uploaded here in Juno. And one of the things that we're doing right now actually is actually even extending that further. So you'll see we have like an email plugin that we will be launching here. It's actually right now just in beta. We're testing it with some firms, but we can automatically go through emails from that client during the year to see if there's anything like estimated payments that have been mentioned in email. And we're also working with the practice management systems, the various ones that we integrate with, to pull in more context. We'd really like to get all of the context we possibly can here to make sure that we don't miss anything. AI is really great at like reading through a whole year's worth of emails for you. And so what it doesn't yet do, like in the email, for example, if you ran a projection and like, during the year, it won't like compare that projection to the current return as an example, just to try to give you guys some examples of what we're not doing here. But what we will do is go and look through comments about estimated payments, right? Regardless of the format that comes in from, and all like organizer answers, for example, even if they're unstructured answers. As you guys can imagine, it's not. Oftentimes, it'll be like kind of a sentence, like, "Oh, I got married this year," or something like that, or "I got married in December." And so we will actually go through those contextual, answers, if you will, like the kind of text, whether it's an email or an organizer. We treat it the same way. So we're looking for context that would impact the return, and we're surfacing that for surfacing the information here if it's something that we have not entered, and then we're double checking all the things that we did enter. So at a high level, I think that is pretty a pretty good run through of reviewer. Exactly,
Mhm.
Josh. If you want to run over to advisor, the other thing we
Yeah.
wanted to talk about here in the next kind of, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, Josh, if we use, so we leave some time for Q&A at the end here,
Mhm.
is, we also have advisor built in. Like this is an amazing product. One comment I'll make here is that, you know, uh, AI is really great at like helping expedite projections or answer questions in a more thorough manner. For advisor, we don't talk about it a ton in the sales process. It's just a free part of our product for anyone that's using it, but it gives you the ability to kind of use a chat interface to be able to answer those types of questions. And the really important thing that it has here that's an advantage versus using, ChatGPT or something like that is actually the context of the return. The really time consuming answers to questions, or the time consuming work done around a tax return for advisory work is often time consuming because every answer you give in tax, or at least like the vast majority of them in my experience, are related to the context of the return. So for example, like child independent care expense is a big great one since it's top of mind here. Depending on your income level, you may or may not be able to deduct those things, right? Or you may not see it flow through on the return. So in Advisor, I could go and say, "Hey, what's going on with this client?" Or like, if they email you and say, "Well, I'm gonna, I don't know, I have preschool expenses this year. Should I submit those to you?" You can go through and get an answer here that's actually going to go look at the tax return, and then it's going to give you a contextual answer based on the return. So I think, Josh, what you were going to pull up was maybe like the tax strategy deep dive, which is our most common
Mhm.
query here. We do have some pre-built agents, like these are pre-templated for things that we see really commonly. So you can see like the impact of a new tax law, right, with the OBBB laws. It seems like so many letters for that one. Or you can see a deep dive on tax strategy, which is often used for like a delivery letter or to kick off advisory services. Um,
Mhm.
these are pre-built just to give you like a really thorough answer. It'll give you a better prompt basically for it. But we've also got, I mean, there's a million things you could do. You could literally free form and just type in anything you want here. But there's also some pre-templated ones just so people understand what they can do here. So anyways, Josh, I'll let you jump into an example if you want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to, I guess, stress the difference between the advisory agents versus the custom prompt. Too, I know Dave mentioned it, but these are pre-built ones. that'll run an analysis over some of the really common things that we see. I think this tax strategy deep analysis is probably the most common one, and I ran one of those that I can pull up in just a second to show what it looks like. And then at the top of the screen is where you can enter a custom prompt. So if you have really specific things that you're looking for, if you like the analysis these agents give, but there's another different element you want them to look at, I think coming up with a custom prompt and saving that to the prompt library that you can use every time is the best course of action there. This prompt library um, is you'll be able to click into it on the right of the screen here. There will be some that are common ones we see utilized that everybody will see here in this section. But then there's also this My Saved Prompts one on the right-hand side of the screen where you can ask a custom prompt in Advisor. Here, I just ran one the other day that said, please generate me an email for this client over the return that we just processed and save that here so it shows up. And then when you click on it, you can copy it in and run it for a new client, or you can load the message to show the prompt that was previously run. I'm gonna
Yeah, so
jump.
one quick comment there.
Sorry.
You can
Yeah.
save your own. Well, yeah, so an example would be like a delivery letter. If you've got a specific format that you want to use for a delivery letter, you could save that as a prompt here. And so then your team could run the same prompt over and over again. So for example, like on well, I'm going to do this off the top of my head, so I'm probably going to get this a little bit wrong, but on our delivery letters as a firm, we actually have a template, and you can just upload the template and say like, hey, create a delivery letter that kind of looks like this template, or you could give it an example of a previous delivery letter that you put together. But then you can make sure that it's got, for me on the delivery letters, what I typically will do is say, hey, at the very top, I want to say like, you got to make these payments, right? You owe money or you're getting a refund. And then below that, I want to talk about what changed this year that's driving those differences. And then I want a more detailed list of instructions on what to do to complete their tax filing for the year. Like you need to sign your 8879. It should be sent to you through TaxDome or Carbon Canopy, whatever it might be, from 360. And so I want instructions, and they should generally look like this. But adjust it based on the specific return. So you can prompt it with something like that, and then you can save that template for your team, so that if you wanted to, you could have your team go ahead and pre-run like a delivery letter and include that in your, for us, like we put it in the file folder for that client, so that it's already templated for the final reviewer in our case. If you're a solo practitioner, you're probably going to use this more for, you could still do delivery letters. That's a great use for it, obviously, but you also could use it for answering emails, things like that. The inevitable like 2 p.m. Friday email that is a hilariously complex tax question that sounds very simple. I had someone, let me think of a couple that came up this year, like someone that was about to start taking Social Security and they wanted to know what to withhold, right? And it becomes a 5-minute task or a 3-minute task instead of having to go open up their prior year return and see what happened last year that wasn't going to happen again this year. To get their marginal tax rate. And a quick answer like that can actually be quite time consuming for you. So this is just a really great product for email answers, light projection work, and then like deliver letters and things like that. Those are the most common uses we see. I don't know, Josh, if I'm missing anything on that list that you see people use this for, but those would be the ones that come to mind for me.
Yeah, I think those are the key ones. And then within Advisor here, before we jump to the Q&A, I just wanted to call out that we have this chat history feature, which is where you can always see the previous messages or the previous prompts you've used. And there will be a couple of different options here. So it's separated between the chat, which we pointed out is like that custom prompt window at the top of the screen. That's where I ran the delivery email request that I was just showing over the client we've exported. And then if you toggle, you'll also be able to see the different advisory agents that you've run. And those are the pre-built agents that we talked about. This is an example of the tax strategy deep analysis report that I ran for the client we've been working through for this whole boot camp after the export and after I ran reviewer yesterday. So it'll just go through and generate a summary for this client and run through a couple of different scenarios, highlighting in depth some of the different tax strategy options and analysis that it's seeing here. The final thing that I wanted to point out in Advisor is just going over how to make sure you've got the right client selected and the right document selected for your prompt here, you'll utilize the select client feature here. For on this account, I've only got one client selected, and that makes it really easy. But you've also got the ability to search and show only business clients too, since you can absolutely run business returns through Advisor, and we've got some different agents specifically built for those too. But once you've gotten the client selected, you'll see this documents window pop up at the top of the screen. And then from there, you can just go filter, look through all the different documents that you have uploaded into Juno. So if I wanted to generate a custom prompt based off of their 2024 return, I can make sure I have that selected, add it to the analysis, and then I'm all set to go to run that custom prompt. In this window, you can choose the format that you get the response into. So if I'm looking for the email and want an email to deliver the return to them, I can select that format. We've got the presentation format too that will generate some slides, or there are some other options too, just depending on how in depth or concise you want the analysis and the output to be. I think you're muted, Dave.
I was saying it's a pretty flexible system for our customers to be able to use, and pretty powerful in terms of what it can do. It can even do scenario planning. You can say, hey, based on last year's return, if they did these three things differently, how would it change this year's return? And it's going to automatically apply the correct tax year. It's going to look at the context of, you don't actually on the documents. I typically don't deselect documents. You can if you want to. And Josh gave the perfect example there of like, I want to run this based on the 2024, base year. But oftentimes I'll just let it have all the context. It's pretty good at understanding where it needs to go for context. So you can leave it all in there, but if you needed to, you could reduce the context window, and just say kind of like use this one document to answer this question.
Yeah, and I
And
think
one
that's
other quick comment there, like there may be times, sorry, Josh, I just thought of something else. I used it also one time this year for a client that got a much larger invoice than expected and just said like, hey, can you go through the tax return and go through the original projection that we ran? And I actually like uploaded a projection that we had run and tell me what changed between the projection and the actual tax return. And then help basically like give me some context on why this year's return cost more than last year. And it went through and like listed all the changes. Like you had two extra 1099 INTs, or you had an extra brokerage statement. In this case, it was someone that sold their primary home. And one of the things it said that was really helpful for me was because this person was about to get a larger bill than they expected, or at least that was kind of the fear. Was saying, hey, you sold your primary home, and there were like there's a ton of work there, but we found actually an extra, $150,000 of basis versus what we ran in your projection. So, effectively, like the time we spent on this was well worth it because you ended up saving a significant amount of tax on that. So that's another good example of what you could do. But I give that specifically because you might upload different contextual documents here that you're not using for tax prep, just to get answers on those, either an email or an Excel document or something if you're doing your
Mhm.
projections in that format.
Yep. And there's this always this upload screen here too. I guess I didn't click on it earlier, but you can attach files here directly in Advisor, and you don't have to go back into Prepare and upload them with the return there to make it a little bit easier.
Perfect. Should we jump over to Q&A? I see the team's been firing through these, which is great. If you haven't had your question answered, I mean, we'll scroll, but you guys are welcome to re-ask if you want us to talk about something specifically here, just so it pops to the top. But I'll scroll up and see if there's anything outstanding. Um, Yeah, in terms of integrations, one comment there, like what we're looking at here in the back half of the year is Pro Series, and potentially Pro Systems FX would be two extra tax softwares that we're probably going to add this year. Pro Series is not going to be too far out here. Pro Systems FX is not a full lock for the product roadmap yet, but we think it's probably going to be in scope for something like October, November. But that could change. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt there. From a firm, like a practice management perspective, I think we've got the list that we're going to have for this year, would be my guess. So we've got Carbon Canopy, Firm 360, and TaxDome. And then we also will be doing, we also have Smart Vault as well as like Google Drive. We actually are in beta with SharePoint as well, so you can pull in files from Microsoft systems. And we'll continue to add to like the document management integrations that we have as well, just to make it easier to pull documents in there. So that's kind of the current list of integrations. I think unless I missed something, Josh, are there any other integrations I'm not thinking about that we've got?
Don't think so.
Yeah, and the canopy, we'll put the canopy icon on there as well. If you guys, so one of the things that I will comment on for integrations is that for a practice management software, you often turn that on through your practice management software. Um, the reason for that is that you've got to they need to know that you're agreeing to share files with Juno, if that makes sense. So there's like an approval that comes through those systems. And that's why those are what we call like feature flagged, which means like the specific icons that you see are based on your firm. So you won't see like every possible, integration on that screen. You'll just see the integrations that are set up with your account. If for some reason you want like Google Drive and Carbon or Canopy or whatever it might be, and you don't see it there, just reach out to our team. You can reach out to the support team, or you can reach out to your success person to see if we have something available. Yeah, count is definitely on the list as well. That's another one that I think we definitely have on our short list for something coming up very soon. We want to gather all the context possible. It just will make it easier for all our tax professionals, for all these systems to work together. It's really, really critical to be able to do it that way. So we will continue to push on that as fast as we possibly can. Oh, and someone asked about trusts. Yeah, trusts are on the roadmap as well. I'm going to try to get them done before this tax season. I think, a lot of we built a lot of the components of a trust return. So I think, right now, like I'd say there's I don't know, maybe a 50% chance or something we get it by January for these different platforms. But there just aren't as many trust returns overall as there are 1040s and partnerships and businesses. So it's definitely on the roadmap. I can't say exactly where. I'd say there's some chance we get it done before tax season. It just depends on what else pops up for us. But you can use Advisor already with trusts. So you could go in there and use Advisor, and actually, what's kind of interesting is you can use Advisor as a reviewer as well. If you upload the source documents and the return, it will still go through and like validate that information got through the return. So there's quite a bit you can actually do with trusts. We just don't talk about it that often because it's not one of our like core return types. But it is something we are looking to add to the list. Trusts are probably next for us in terms of like return type that we would support. Emails. Oh yeah, great question on emails. Yeah, you're going to have like a plugin basically, right? So you'll be able to with both Microsoft, I think with Outlook and Gmail, we'll be able to basically plug that in, and we will start to be able to automatically look for emails from that client. We have their email already, typically from the practice management software as well as like from your tax software. So we kind of know which client goes with which email typically. And so we can just go back and look for emails that are relevant just to the tax return, and run like a quick call basically before we run reviewer is probably what we're going to do there to automatically pull that information in from email. So that's kind of what that would look like. And actually what's cool about it is, it'll fit right into the flow that you guys already see. It won't be like this additional like complex, like no additional complexity in the kind of UI. The other thing that we will do at some point, we're still trying to figure this out, but like the way we use our client tab, I'd like to see kind of contextual emails on that client tab, and that's something I think we are actively working on. That will be coming out at some point in the next few months, where you'll be able to see like any relevant emails from that client throughout the year in that client tab. We want to kind of turn that into like a planning or advisory central hub for you, but we're also being thoughtful not to like recreate functionality that you might see in your practice management software. Like I don't want to put things in here just to put them in here. So anyways, that's kind of what we're doing on the email front. I see a question about 7216. So, I'm not a lawyer, I am a CPA, but from a 7216 perspective, a couple relevant facts. We are generally used in the process of tax preparation, which means that there's a broader disclosure for how you use that information. It doesn't typically need to be like each vendor doesn't need to be disclosed to your clients. So for example, like most people are not updating their engagement letters when they start to use Juno, because of there's not a need for disclosure of using those systems when using them for tax preparation. And our data is all US based. So we use US based servers. And so there's no like offshore concerns there that we would trigger. Obviously, if your staff is offshore, then nonetheless you have to go get approval from your clients to be able to access their data with an offshore, either like frankly even store it offshore or have someone access it who is offshore. But Juno's US based, and our servers are as well. So it shouldn't trigger any sort of like need to disclose any offshore usage there. And again, we're going to go get the recording of the security webinar that we did last week with the NAEA and share that with folks. So we'll email that out. I think we were just waiting for them to get us a link. So we'll share that. We did a whole hour on this and went into like more detail than you can ever imagine, along with the Verito team, which is really great. And Jitin is a really deep expert in that. And so we went through an entire hour of like the scenarios there and why that matters. We can't yet see Taxdome chats. So, the Taxdome team's been amazing to work with, and we've got a great integration with them. One of the things that we are working with them on actively now is being able to pull documents automatically and be able to sync those documents as well. But we haven't yet talked about bringing in chats. I don't think that's, well, we will definitely get to that at some point. They're also working on an MCP server, which is something that will enable us to go pull more context. So I think that will happen. I'm not quite sure when yet. And the same is true with Carbon and Canopy and Firm 360. Each of those integrations will be a little bit unique. If you've got questions about them specifically or want to see functionality, just know in general what we're pushing for with those teams is the ability to pull as much context as possible. So I'd love to see chats. I'd love to see emails. I'd love to see, statuses basically flow back and forth between the two systems. I want to be able to push a return back into Carbon or Canopy or Firm 360 or Taxdome for delivery. That is like what we're really pressing towards. And then if we do that, we actually can pre-run both the initial validation. So we could have that all the documents would be pre-processed, and then also be able to pre-run reviewer depending on the type of tax software that you're using. So that's what we are pushing towards. I'd love for, right now we say we do 95% of the fields on a return and on average of 7 minutes, right? I'd love for that 7 minutes to be 2 minutes. That's kind of what we're pushing for. And I want to get as close to 100% from 95 before we get to this tax season. So that's kind of what we're most focused on, is getting closer to 100% just to make it easier for folks to be able to really quickly and accurately prepare returns. But good questions there. Josh, anything you're seeing?
I don't think so. I'm trying to just respond to a couple in the chat. But I don't think there's anything else I'm seeing.
I see a question on brokerage statements. We do the totals for each tax class, if you will, like with and without basis, long and short term. And we do enter the totals. We don't enter it on a per trade basis. There's limits in some of the tax software of like how many trades you can enter. Or there's sometimes like additional screens that need to be. And so we do enter the totals. And then we also give you the PDF of the brokerage statement so that you can attach that to the return in the cases where you're required to do that. So that's how we enter that information. It's easier to validate the information at the total level. You can imagine if we put in like 100 trades, then all of a sudden like the validation on your end would be much longer. I always did that as a firm. For my firm, we always entered the totals. That's just something that we kind of considered a best practice. But that's something we have debated internally, and always I'm sure we'll continue to debate. But right now, what we do is enter the totals and then give you the PDF as well, so you can attach that for the per trade information if you need to have that on the return. And by the way, we did send out the link to the NAEA webinar. So anybody who wants to go deep down the security 7216 rabbit hole, there's some really good information there. I think about 30 minutes in, we talk about ChatGPT and Claude as well. Like one really interesting piece there is, I do think that those right now would require an additional disclosure for 7216, but we talk about that for like 10 or 15 minutes on that webinar. So something you guys can dive into there. Sorry, let me qualify that. They wouldn't require a disclosure if you are using client information, which would include an email, obviously their name, their social security number, like any sort of client PII basically, identifiable information for the client. So, but we talk about that at length there. The other quick thing I'll say on that note is just, it's a really interesting topic. It's one that we're going to continue to talk about quite a bit. I'm not like I don't want to fear monger in terms of how people use these tools. I want to be very measured in that. If you're worried about that, I definitely would recommend like looking at the resources that the AICPA or the NAEA or Cameco or some of those different bodies have put out around 7216 rules. It's a big deal for the profession and definitely something people should be thinking about. Perfect. I know we're at time. So yeah, if you can't for some reason get that webinar, I see quite a few questions on that. I think Amanda and our team, I think, has emailed that out to some folks. If you want that, you can actually ping support as well, or I don't know, Amanda, if you want to send it to a broader group. But the happy to get that to you guys. If you want it, you can hit live support on our site and ask for that, and we'll make sure we get it available for you. Beautiful. Well, really appreciate the participation. Thank you, Josh, for driving that. Sorry, my caffeine kicked in so much, and I did so much of the talking today. It was not how we designed this. But when the mood hits, you got to go with it. But I really appreciate everybody taking the time. Yeah, if you respond to this, there's a poll right now. If you want the link for the NAEA, we'll send that to you directly if you say yes in the poll. And yeah, just appreciate everybody doing this. We're going to do more of these as we go forward. We know that it's a complex product and like learning to use it, you want to have resources available to do so. So we'll have both boot camps and Q&A sessions and a whole bunch of things lined up for tax season this year. And we'll do some of these additionally, I think, over the next couple months. So we'll let you know. We'll be emailing out what's upcoming there. And if you guys ever have something that you don't have that you think we should be providing, then just either leave it in Modern Tax Pros or you can contact the support team and just say, hey, in general, like I'd love to see more of this. We love that feedback. Are really grateful for the feedback we get from our customers, and we're constantly taking it and making our product better. And the way we train the staff as well. That's a huge focus for us over the next few months as we get ready for next tax season. So I think we'll close up from there and let you guys get back to getting ready for extension season. Good luck with the September 15th deadline. Yeah, thank you, Josh, for running this for us, and I appreciate everybody who's been running the chat as well.